posted by u/exormal. Long story short, I, 22F, fled across the country from my family last December, about a week before Christmas. I left because my brother, 32M, is a rapist, and I was his victim from the ages of 12 to 16. I have other posts going more in-depth, but my parents, 60F and 66M, are hardcore African Pentecostal Christians. This means they believe in praying in tongues, being filled with the Holy Spirit, collapsing on the floor, and seeing visions. My parents are both pastors and own their own church. I was 17 when everything came out about what my brother had done to me. My parents' reaction was to bury everything, force me to forgive my brother, and keep the church's reputation intact. My dad said he never understood family secrets until then, and both my parents told me I should never tell anyone about what happened to me. They let my brother move back into the basement and continue living with us for years. During and after all of that, I felt like I was dying inside. Living in that house felt like hell on earth, and I was struggling mentally. I went from graduating high school with a 4.1 GPA to dropping out of college with a 2.3 GPA. I stopped attending all my classes and responding to people, and things were getting really dark for me. So in December, my boyfriend, 21M, and I decided that I had nothing to lose by packing a suitcase, taking my important documents, and flying across the country to live with his family. I sent my parents a super long email detailing why I left and renouncing religion. I blocked their numbers and emails, and I haven't spoken to anyone in my family for the last 8 months. Recently, I've gotten emails from my mom that I noticed while checking my spam folder, and my boyfriend has gotten voicemails from my dad. He has like 4 different numbers, and we forgot to block all of them. The emails have been making me feel extremely guilty for just up and leaving my parents. My mom tells me in all the emails about how she cries herself to sleep every night because I was her only daughter and prays I'll come home. And despite everything, she's still the woman who sacrificed a lot to raise me for 21 years, and it hurts me to know I'm actively hurting her like this. Most people with immigrant parents know how hard it is to form an open and trusting relationship with them. And even if they didn't support me mentally and emotionally, they supported me financially for 21 years, and I feel extremely selfish about never speaking to them again. It still hurts a lot 8 months later, and I'm starting to wonder if I really did make the right choice. Edit. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for the overwhelming support. I did not think so many people would read my post or care enough to leave a comment. So, thank you all so much. Secondly, I see a lot of people telling me I need to go to the police and open a case against my brother. I did do that when I was 17. My parents begged me to stop talking to the detectives. They told me that the police were never on my side and were looking for reasons to put me away as well. They said my dad's reputation would be ruined, and they wouldn't have a church anymore. So, I refused to talk to the detectives any further because I didn't want to destroy my family's livelihood. I have another brother who is severely disabled, and I was really worried about how they would afford to take care of him without the church. A few weeks later, when my brother got the call that the case was dropped, he came into the church singing and yelling his testimony that the devil sent demons to try to put my brother away, but God defeated them and he's free. He intentionally kept it pretty vague in front of the congregation. My dad promised me that he would never let my brother spend another night in the house again. A year later, they moved him back into the basement, and that's when I started spiraling. So, now that I'm across the country, finding the detective to reopen the case might be difficult, but I think there's a picture of her contact card somewhere in my Google Photos that I need to dig up and give a ring. Editor's note. This is a post-op made 6 months prior that details the events that happened in her escape. It is titled, I've finally fled my abusive parents, who enabled my rapist brother. I, 21F, have finally fled across the country from my grape apologist parents, 65M and 59F. My parents are incredibly religious Africans who emigrated from a country that consistently ranks among the top 10 poorest in the world. When they immigrated to America, they had me but left their 3 sons in Africa. They brought my youngest brother, 29M, to America for medical attention a few years after I was born because he became gravely ill, and he is now permanently disabled. When I was around 8 years old, my parents brought another brother, 31M, Mike, to America. My eldest brother, 42M, has never been to America, and I have never been to Africa, so we have never met in person. My parents are extremely religious Pentecostal Christians, which means they believe in visions, miracles, like instantaneous healing and bringing people back from the dead, and speaking in tongues. And in case I haven't made it clear how religious they are, during peak COVID, my parents were preaching from the pulpit of their church that Bill Gates made 5G to kill Africans and that COVID vaccines were being used to inject 5G as a way to imprint the mark of the beast. They also absolutely refused to close their church's doors at any point during COVID on the basis that God wouldn't let them catch it. Mike began essaying me when I was 12 years old, and he was 22. It started infrequently but quickly ramped up to him doing it almost every night or every other night. At 13, he took my first time. Every time he was done, he would beg me not to tell anyone and write me notes, saying he would off himself if anyone ever found out. He always made me rip up the notes and flush them afterward. Before all of this began, I had looked up to Mike and loved spending time with him, so 13-year-old me absolutely did not want to cause him to commit suicide. It eventually started slowing down, and I thought he had completely stopped when I was 15. I believe Mike grew weary of doing anything to me because I had finally begun making friends and got a boyfriend, after having previously been a really shy loner. He had completely stopped by the time my boyfriend, 21M, and I got together 6 years ago. Throughout all these years, my parents had no clue that anything was happening under their roof. They were extreme helicopter parents who constantly took away my phone to read my messages, and would install things to listen in on my phone calls. They constantly screamed and threatened to ship me to Africa for not being a virtuous woman because I would sleep in instead of waking up early to clean, didn't know how to cook, and didn't like washing dishes. In addition to all of this, my father would routinely say that God was giving him visions about various things. These would vary wildly, from being sent visions of people's deaths to seeing future pandemics. However, he would also come and scream at me that I was going to hell because God had sent him a vision that I was having bedroom intimacy with my boyfriend. Yet, God never sent him a vision of his adult son essaying his child daughter a few feet down the hall? Odd. So, by the time I was 16, I had already confided in my boyfriend and my two closest friends about what my brother used to do to me. All of them strongly urged me to tell someone, but I was deathly afraid of the consequences. I wholeheartedly believed that I held some blame for being essayed because I could have told someone at any point, but I had let it go on for years. At 16, I felt that reporting it after the essay had already ended would be like ruining Mike's life for something I could have stopped years ago. That was until early 2018 when Mike decided he wanted to try touching me again. As soon as I got away from him, I went and told my boyfriend, who told his mother because he was scared for my safety. His mom immediately reported it to authorities through the non-emergency number, and a few hours later, a cop was knocking on my door. When the cop came, he questioned me, and I told him everything that had happened. He then informed my father that my boyfriend's mother had called in a report about Mike essaying me. My father absolutely flew off the handle and completely denied everything. He accused my boyfriend and me of coming up with this to hurt our family. My mother and Mike were at the newly purchased church at the time, preparing it for opening day, so they had to be called to come home. After they returned, the cop called in for another officer to come, and I was taken in one car for the start of the investigation, while Mike was taken in another. My parents put my other brother in their car and drove behind us to the police station. At the station, I told the detective everything I could, and at the end, she asked me if I wanted to go home with my parents. She explained that Mike was not allowed back into the house while the investigation was ongoing and that he had to stay elsewhere. I was afraid to say outright that I didn't want to go back to my parents because I didn't want that getting back to them. So, I tried to explain that my father didn't believe me, but the detective assured me that my parents were just shocked by the news and that I would be safe with them. So, I went home with my parents that night. At some point, my parents questioned Mike, and though he didn't want to admit it, he didn't deny it either. Finally, they began to believe that Mike was an incestuous, pedophilic rapist. The problem was they did not want word of that getting out. So, they sat me down multiple times and begged me to drop the investigation for the sake of our family name. My parents said that this coming out would disgrace the family's reputation and ruin the church they had just opened. They guilt-tripped me into believing that I would single-handedly destroy the entire family if I continued with the investigation. The cherry on top was when my mother looked me in the eyes and said, "All of this must have affected Mike more than you because he said he wanted to unalive himself." After my parents took me to tell the detective that I no longer wished to continue with the investigation, my dad started screaming at me in the car on the way to Bible study. He was furious because, according to him, I trusted my boyfriend's mother more than him, which meant I couldn't be trusted. My father then yelled that people who couldn't be trusted were capable of anything, and if I ever tried to unalive my parents, God would strike me first. Hearing my own father say I was capable of such a thing absolutely broke me. I remember sobbing and begging God to just unalive me because I would have rather burned in hell for all eternity than live a life where my own parents hated me so much. I no longer believe in God. Eventually, my parents sat me down and promised they would never let Mike spend another night in the house. But they told me, and had multiple older family members tell me, that I had to forgive Mike because blood is thicker than water. My parents also said this was a family secret that should never be spoken about again. Fast forward about 2 years, I still lived with my parents when I wasn't on campus because I was financially dependent on them, and they were paying for my college tuition. They told me they were moving Mike back into the house, and he was going to live in the basement. My parents said Mike was struggling and ruining his life out on his own, so they were bringing him back home. They treated him like some sort of prodigal son, with my father even going so far as to call him that in front of the congregation when Mike started coming to church again. Then COVID hit, and I was forced to live at home with Mike. I was broke because my parents refused to let me work while I was in college, so I only ever had summer job money. My mental health began plummeting, and I went from graduating high school with a 4.1 GPA to failing multiple classes by my junior year of college. Even when my university reopened and I was able to flee back to campus, my grades still suffered. I couldn't regain the mental capacity I used to have. I reached out to my university's student counseling services, but besides prescribing me anti-anxiety meds, the university said my trauma was too severe for them to handle. They gave me referrals to psychiatrists who could do full psychological evaluations, but none of them ever accepted the crappy insurance my parents had me under, and the out-of-pocket fees were way too high for me to afford. I was hiding all of this from my parents because I knew it would result in more screaming and insults if they found out I was performing below their expectations in school. They also believed that any and all mental health issues were caused by demons and thought that mental health medication made people dumber. This all came to a head this past fall semester, my senior year, when I had to take a medical leave of absence or risk failing out. I waited until the deadline to apply for the leave of absence so that I wouldn't be forced to go home. Eventually, I did have to move out in December, but my parents assumed I was just moving out for winter break. However, after my boyfriend and I had packed up my dorm and driven to my house, it was late. We both realized that we dreaded going into my house so much that we decided to just sleep in the car and go inside in the morning. I think that was a defining moment in my mind. I have had multiple people telling me for years that I should leave my parents and go no contact with my entire family, but I was too scared because I was so financially dependent on them. They paid for my phone bill, gave me a car in their name, and covered my college expenses. I felt infinitely selfish for taking advantage of all this and then just spitting in their face by never talking to them again. But after choosing to sleep in a car with my boyfriend over sleeping in my own house, I realized that if other people can live without parental financial aid and still make it in life, then I could do that too. It made me understand that being suicidal and failing out of college because I couldn't afford thousands of dollars in mental health services was no worse than cutting off my financial ties with my parents and trying to save my mental health and my life. So, that's what I did. The week before Christmas, my boyfriend was going to fly across the country to visit his family because they had moved after we graduated from high school. I decided that this was basically my best chance to go no contact. So, the day before the flight, with the last of the money in my bank account, I bought a ticket for the same 2 connecting flights that my boyfriend was taking. We packed our stuff that night, and I had to leave a lot of things behind since I could only take 1 suitcase and a backpack. But I took my passport, social security card, clothes, electronics, and any sentimental items I could fit, and we left. My parents didn't think anything of us leaving because they knew my boyfriend's flight was early that day, so they expected me to drive him to the airport. However, when we got to the airport, we parked the car in one of the airport garages. I put the key behind the gas tank cover and took pictures of it all. I texted my parents to let them know where the car and key were, told them I was safe, and said I would send them an email explaining everything later. Then, I blocked them on everything I could think of. Throughout the flights and layover, I was writing an email in much more detail than what's given here about how my parents had failed to raise, protect, and support me in every way imaginable. I sent the email after we landed and then proceeded to block their emails too. So, for the past 2 weeks, I have been staying with my boyfriend's family. All of my parents' blocked texts and emails go to spam, but their voicemails still pop up. I have my boyfriend field all of their messages to see if they have even attempted to self-reflect on anything because they have a history of telling me events never happened when I point out how they've treated me. Thus far, it has only been my mom telling me that I'm going to send her to the hospital and that I need to come home. So, my boyfriend and I have been doing DoorDash and trying to afford a mental evaluation for myself. DoorDashing sucks in the town they live in, though, lol. I just wanted to get this all off my chest, I guess. But I am super hopeful for the future now. Thanks for reading. Update 4 months 3 weeks later. So, a few days before Christmas, my mother randomly showed up at my boyfriend's family's front doorstep. She traveled across the entire country to find me unannounced. I had no idea she was coming and was very blindsided by everything. She asked to speak with me, and I was really hoping that things had changed, so I agreed to listen to her. We sat on chairs in the front lawn. She asked me if I was okay, and she started telling me how happy she was to see me. She said that she and my father had been in and out of the hospital with worry and stress about me. She also said that she was sorry for the things she did not know and things that were done out of ignorance. After all of that, she asked me if I wanted to talk to my disabled brother, and I really missed him, so she called my father. He began to tell me how he was finally going to sleep for the first night since I left the house now that he got to see my face. He also repeated most of the things my mother said, almost word for word, things like apologizing for what he didn't know was happening. He also said, "Find it in your heart to forgive us just as we have." He trailed off there, and that line was literally a wake-up call because, at that point, I had been crying and feeling so guilty for what I've been putting my elderly parents through. But that line made me pause because what in the world does he possibly have to forgive me for? What did I do to him? Flee for my safety? I think my mother noticed my change in demeanor because she ended the call with him pretty soon after and asked to take me out to eat. I brought my boyfriend with us so I wouldn't be driven to an airport instead. We went to a local restaurant, and the silence during our meal was palpable, until my boyfriend went to the bathroom. My mother then began grilling me on where I work, what I am doing with my future, and if I am going back to college. She asked me if I was thinking about going back to our home state to finish college, and I told her I was not leaving with her under any circumstances. I noticed that throughout all the questions she asked me since she arrived at our doorstep, she never truly asked me how I was doing. She didn't ask if I had a bed to sleep on, food to eat, means of transportation, or even money in my bank account. I never told her that my food stamps were halted for the month of December because I missed one letter, so I have to wait until halfway through January to get a recertification appointment. She probably would have been appalled that I was taking government handouts anyway. I never told her that I am working $1 above minimum wage job, that I actually really love, to save $3,000 to pay my old university to release my transcripts. But even if she offered to help, it most likely would have had heavy strings attached. After we left the restaurant, she tried asking me for my phone number. I told her that I have a new Google Voice number after the one my father used to pay for was turned off. She was apparently under the impression that he was still paying for the phone. So she called him again, and when asked about the old phone plan, he stuttered heavily before saying that he was still paying for it and had no idea what happened. When my mother tried to tell him that he needs to investigate, he told her that she should stop worrying about that and offered to buy me a new phone plan. I declined because I did not want my parents to be able to hold anything over my head. He then went on to start lecturing me about finishing college and how whatever anybody has said about my parents is not true. He even managed to very quickly drop in a "well, you said you don't believe in God anymore, but anyways." I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reply. After getting off the phone with my father, my mother asked if I wanted to spend the night at her hotel room because she missed me so much. I also declined that, and she dropped us off at the house. A few days after she left, I received a Christmas card and a $50 gift card from her in the mail. I guess the point of my update is to ask if I am still doing the right thing. I mostly feel really guilty about my mother because she's old, she believes and does whatever my father says, and I think my father's pride about power and reputation makes him a really crappy person. I also know for a fact that they are still in contact with and working with my greatest brother, so I know that I really shouldn't give a crap about them either. But my heart hurts, and I am really confused. I appreciate all advice. Thank you for reading.